PowerPoint has long been the staple software for storytelling in professional settings. And whether you're giving a TED Talk or a boardroom presentation, using presentation software like PowerPoint can help you tell engaging stories that captivate your audience. Unfortunately, not every slide deck that you work on is going to be about telling a great story. And this is especially true if you work in the field of data analytics or market research, where 100-slide decks packed with charts and tables are actually really common. In fact, we even have a name for this kind of format, and it's called a data dump. A data dump is essentially a PowerPoint presentation that is packed with charts and data. These presentation formats are also really long, sometimes with hundreds of slides, and they're usually really repetitive because they have every possible cut of your data set. Now, as much as possible, you really want to avoid creating data dumps as a presentation format. They are not a good use of a researcher or analyst's time, and that's because they're generally packed with information, but not necessarily insight. However, this format is still really common for people who work in a data-related field or job function. And although you can try and steer your stakeholders away from this kind of format, the hard truth is that sometimes you just need to do what you're told, either by your client or by your boss. And when you do find yourself in a situation where you need to work on a chart-heavy presentation with lots of repetitive slides, I have really good news for you. And that is that there's an epic automation that could help save you hours, maybe even days of time creating PowerPoint presentations. And this way you can spend less time creating charts and formatting slides and spending more time on tasks that actually create value, like data analysis. So let's get into it. To achieve this miracle of automation, we're going to be using a Python script aptly named pptx-python, and we'll also be using ChatGPT to write some additional code for us that will be handling some other functionality. Also, I wanted to give a special shout out to the Python script creator and maintainer, Steve Kenny. He's worked really hard on this script, and he also actively maintains it. It's really cool, and I've linked to his GitHub profile in the description of this video. Now, before we get into the tutorial, I have 3 really important caveats that I want to cover. The first is that this automation should be used wisely. There is an art to storytelling in giving great presentations, and not every slide presentation you're going to work on is going to be a data dump. Sometimes you do want to focus on creating a really compelling and focused story, and you don't want to over-automate that. So you really do want to think about when is the right time to use this kind of automation and when should you not use it. The second thing is that I've included all the templates and scripts as downloadable files, and there's links to that in the description, but you are probably going to have to modify the templates or the code slightly to suit your needs. The third caveat is that the coding side of this tutorial was achieved using GPT-4 on a paid plan with OpenAI, and that is going to be especially helpful if you need to upload any files for GPT to interrogate. But you can probably achieve the same results on a free plan with GPT 3.5 or another LLM like CodeLlama. Okay, so now we're ready to get into the tutorial. And generally, there's about 4 steps that we're going to go through. The first step is we need to do some general preparation. Then we're going to essentially prepare our data file, which is going to be used by the script to take the data and put them into charts in a PowerPoint. The third step is that we'll prepare our PowerPoint template. And the fourth step is that we'll write our prompt and give that to ChatGPT to essentially write the full Python script that incorporates the pptx-python library, as well as some additional code. Okay, so the first thing you have to do here is you have to have Python installed on your computer. And if you don't have Python installed, there's a really great tutorial on DataCamp that will walk you through this step by step, and it covers both Windows and Mac operating systems. The next thing is you're going to want an IDE installed on your computer. You could technically just create the scripts in like a text file and run these in the terminal of your computer, but it's going to be a little bit easier if you just use an IDE. I prefer to use Visual Studio Code, or VS Code for short. This is a free download available on both Windows and Mac. So if you don't have an IDE installed and you're a little bit new to coding in Python, I really recommend using this software. But if you prefer using a different IDE or the terminal on your computer, you'll be able to follow along just fine. And you're also going to have to install a couple of Python libraries, mainly the pptx-python library, which we mentioned before, as well as the pandas library. If you're not familiar with pandas, it's a quantitative data analysis library that can do a lot of cool things. Very, very popular among data scientists and data analysts. And to install these, after you have Python installed is pretty straightforward. You just have to go into your terminal. You can type in pip install pandas or pip install pptx-python, and it should install it very easily. Okay, we're ready to go into step 2, which is we need to prepare a data set. And what we're really going to get to here is we need to create a structured data set that our script will recognize and understand how to port certain fields of data into the PowerPoint template. So the format that we're going to create here needs to be the same for every time you run this script. So if you're using different data sets every time, you need to make sure that it conforms to this structure that we're going to be working with. Now, for this tutorial, I'm going to be using a survey data set that's actually available for free on Kaggle. If you're not familiar with Kaggle, it's a really cool website that also has a lot of free data sets that you can use either for training your skills as a data analyst or training your machine learning models, etc. And this data set is pretty straightforward. It is a survey of about 1,000 respondents, and it actually has a lot of variables. It has more than 140 questions in the data set that cover a lot of different topics like the respondents' movie or music preferences, their health habits, their personality traits, etc. And again, the nice thing I like about this is that there's a lot of data in here. So if I wanted to chart like all the variables that are inside this data set, it would take a long time because there's essentially over 140 questions. Now, this is an example of what the raw data looks like from Kaggle. If you're new to quantitative research, this might look a little bit intimidating because it just looks like an ocean of numbers. What is essentially happening here is every single row is a unique respondent in the data set. They should really have a column here as a unique identifier, like response ID 1, 2, 3. Then we can just add that in. So now we can essentially have one ID. Each one of these will be one person. And each of the columns here is a different variable in the survey. In this case, it's a question. So where it just says music, this is a short form. They have another downloadable file, which is kind of a lookup that shows like the full question text and how it maps to these short form column headers. So they just put this in to make the file a lot easier to work with. And so each of these columns is basically a question, and these numbers essentially correlate to a response option. A lot of these questions are using what's called an ordinal scale, sometimes known as a Likert scale. That is a 5-point labeled scale where it goes from like strongly agree to somewhat agree to neutral all the way down to strongly disagree. So a lot of these are on a 5-point scale where the 5 means strongly agree and the 1 means strongly disagree. This is a format that you as an analyst can't really draw insights from. You need to analyze it and process it. And generally, one way we do this is with a pivot table. So I can go and click insert pivot table. And now, because I created that response ID column, I'm going to drag that into values, and I'm going to actually change this to count. And then I can just drag one of these variables in. Let me grab folk. They show the response scales on the website. So for folk, this was a 5-point scale from 1, which was don't enjoy at all, to 5, which was enjoy very much. And you'll notice later on, there's interest scales here. And then you see there's some other custom scales like smoking and drinking habits. And then there's lots and lots of questions that are 5-point scales related to strongly agree or disagree. So if I go back here, I pulled on the folk variable here, and I'm going to remove that blank. And this is showing the counts. There's actually over 1,000 respondents. I can actually change this to percentages. So show value as percent of column total. And now you're actually seeing here the values. So about 29% said 1, which was that they don't enjoy folk at all. And about 5.5%, 6% said they enjoyed a lot. So this is how you would aggregate this data. You'd create pivot tables. You'd aggregate the responses. You could turn this into charts and visualizations and all that. That's great. Now I'm going to jump a few steps here because I need to go through and aggregate all of this data. And if I do this one at a time, it's probably going to take hours. And the cool thing is I was able to get ChatGPT to do this pretty easily. So what I did was I wrote a prompt where I also uploaded the data set. And I think you could probably pull this prompt off without having to upload the data. So if you do have a free plan of ChatGPT, you could probably still do this. And I described the data. I said, this is a data set from an online survey. Every row is one response. Every column is a variable. And I want you to essentially go through and aggregate the responses as percentages. And I also mentioned that I want the results to be stacked. So I want all the data to be shown across 2 columns, and for the final structure to stack the responses on top of each other, because that's going to help with the format that I create later on. So I submitted this to ChatGPT. It took some time to analyze the data, and it was able to give me a downloadable file. Again, the downloadable files option is only going to be available if you have Code Interpreter, which is essentially a function of a paid plan of GPT-4. And from that downloadable file from ChatGPT, I was able to create this new format that the script is going to pull from to get the data that it then ports into PowerPoint. So let me just quickly explain the different columns here. The first column is essentially just a question ID. Now, you'll notice that there are multiple rows for one question. It might seem a little bit redundant, but I need it to be in this format because I need to be able to spread my response values across multiple rows. So this is just able to tell ChatGPT and the script that all of these rows relate to one single question, one variable, because I also want to create one slide for each question or each variable in the survey. And so this is going to help it understand that, okay, only this data should go on slide 1, only this data should go on slide 2, etc. And here you can see the question text that was asked in the survey. There's also the response scale. The value column here is pretty straightforward. It's the selection rate or sample proportion. So essentially when the respondents were asked, do you enjoy listening to music? 82% said they strongly agree, and only 1% said they strongly disagree, etc. Now these two are new. These are special columns. The chart type is the type of chart I want this to be visualized as. And our Python script here needs to make a decision about what kind of visualization to show the data as. So I have actually hard-coded support for 4 types of charts inside of this script, which is a horizontal bar chart, a vertical bar chart, as well as a pie chart and line chart. So the script is currently only going to be able to support those 4 types of charts. And I've already gone through and identified which variables I want to be shown as which chart type. You could also structure your code base in a way that it just uses the same chart type, but the presentation format will look super repetitive. So I like showing a little bit of variance. The way I actually did this too, I didn't even manually do this. I had a little function that just randomly chose between one of the 4 chart types. So this is all just randomly assigned. Now, in the world of data visualization, you do want to be a little bit more purposeful, but for the sake of this, I was able to kind of randomly assign the chart type. And this final column here, column F, is where we will assign a chart layout. Now, in the first version of this, I'm going to create one custom layout in my PowerPoint template, which determines where the chart goes on the slide and where other things go. Later on, I will show you how you can create multiple layouts. So you could say, I want this question to be chart layout 2, this one to be chart layout 3, etc. So this is how my data is structured. And again, every time you run the script in the future, even if you have different types of data, you need to kind of map it into the structure. Now, you can modify your code to have a different data schema. You could completely change the data schema, but this is how I've designed it. Step 3 is to create a PowerPoint template. This script will actually run without a pre-developed template, but the output will look really, really bare bones, and you'll end up just spending a lot of time formatting your charts anyways. So what I'm trying to do here is create something that gets you as close to the finish line as possible so that it does a lot of pre-formatting for you so that the chart and the presentation looks great right out of the gate. And then if you do have to make additional changes, that it's minimal. To get my PowerPoint template, I went to the PowerPoint website here. There's a whole bunch of great templates that are all free for you to download. And I liked this one here. So you can just download this. And this is what it looks like. It's a pretty nice looking PowerPoint presentation. Now, if you're not that familiar with PowerPoint, there is a way for you to create underlying templates. And to do that, you're going to click on View and then go to Slide Master. And here, you're going to see this left side pane kind of change a little bit. This is a slide master, and then inside of this master are a whole bunch of layouts. There's, I believe, about 11 layouts in this template. You can also hover over this, and you can see this one is called the title slide layout. This one is called title and content. This one down here is called section title. So how this works is that if you're creating a new slide, what you can do is go insert a new slide, and you can choose from one of these different templates. And so you can say, okay, well, I want the title and 2-column content format. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layout that is especially made for charts. So we're going to go back to View, Slide Master, and you can either create a new layout from scratch, so you can say Insert Layout, or you can duplicate an existing one. And in this case, I actually quite like this second layout here. This one is called Title and Content Layout. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and I'm going to paste this. So it's going to create a duplicate of that one. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this. And you need to remember what you name it because this will come up later. So I'm going to call this Chart Layout 1. Okay. And if you remember from my Excel file, there was that column called chart layout, and you saw chart layout 1. This is mapping to the name that I gave the chart layout. So again, what you name this is very important. So don't forget to give it a very specific name. Now, the next thing I need to do is these are called placeholders, and I need to change this so that there is a chart placeholder. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to go insert placeholder, and I'm going to choose a chart. You can just click on here, and I'm going to resize this. And I'll also add in another text placeholder. Sometimes you want to write something next to the chart, like an observation, like X% of people thought this. So we'll add in a little text placeholder there as well. That's it for modifying our template. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this. I'm just going to call this template. Now, we're done formatting our template. However, there is an important piece of information we need to get from this document. PowerPoint actually assigns a unique identifier to each one of these placeholders. It's called a placeholder index. And you need to get this information so that we can tell it to ChatGPT so that it knows where to kind of map the variables in the Excel file. It will need to know you should port this data into placeholder index X, Y, or Z. The problem is that getting the placeholder index is not something you can just get inside of the PowerPoint interface. We're going to use Python to get this index value. So this script is linked in the description below, so you can get it from there. Once you get that, what you want to do is save the script. I call it ppt debug, and the template in the same exact folder. And you want to save the PowerPoint template as template.pptx. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go and open VS Studio. And once it's open on your computer, go to File, Open Folder. Just click on the folder and open it. Now we're going to click on PPT Debug. And all you need to do from here is go up to the right side here and click the Start button. So run Python script. And what it's going to do, it's going to get that information that we need here. So you can see that it's printed the details for layout 0, which is the title slide. And there's only one placeholder, which is placeholder 0. And then it tells you the type of placeholder and some other information. Now, this can only check one placeholder at a time. So what you're going to have to do is you can go and change this, and it will go to the next slide layout, and it will print the information for that. So you can see that the layout index equals 1. It correlates to the second slide layout, which was the title and content. And there you can see this one had a lot more placeholders in it. And this is not the one that I'm looking for. The slide layout index equals 2. If I run this, and it'll print the values again. And I know that this is the right one now because it says details for layout 2, chart layout 1, which is what I named that layout. And what we're looking for here is the placeholder index value for the placeholder that contains a chart, which is this one here. And the placeholder index value that I want is 10. So this is the number I want. You need to take note of this for now, because in the prompt that we write for ChatGPT, we need to tell it what placeholder index value to look for. So this is the information that we need. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to ChatGPT, and I have written this kind of long prompt. I basically go to ChatGPT and I say, I want you to create an auto slides generator script written in Python that will automatically generate PowerPoint slides. And I want you to use the existing Python libraries for pandas and pptx-python. So I'm giving it very specific instructions on what language to write this script in and that it should use existing libraries. I also tell it some other things about the format. So I want it to be able to reference a data file with that 6-column structure I mentioned before, as well as my custom PowerPoint template. I've explained some things about the template. I said I created a custom layout that has a chart placeholder, and that placeholder maps to the index value of 10. So that's where I reference the 10. And then I explained the data file, and I specifically explained all of the different columns and what those different columns relate to. And that's basically it. I'm going to run this and see what ChatGPT gives me. So interestingly enough, this doesn't happen all the time, but ChatGPT actually run parallel outputs for me. I don't see this happen very often, but it's quite interesting when it does happen. And it's written very, very different approaches to running these scripts, which is kind of cool. You can kind of A/B test these and see how the different ones work. So I've also included the script as a downloadable resource, so you can go, and there's a link in the description for you to get access to that. And once you're done, you want to save all the files into a folder on your computer. And the folder needs to include these 3 files: the Python script, script that I've just named generate charts v1.py. Make sure that if you are creating this from like a text file, that you name it .py, not .txt. You need that data file, which is, if you remember, it's just this file, the data structure I've created. And we also want the PowerPoint template that I have created, which includes that special chart layout that I created. So once everything's in that folder, go back to VS Code. We're going to go open folder. We're going to navigate to that folder. I'm going to open it. And what I'm looking for is the generate charts Python file. So there it is. There's my code. Now this code has some file names and pathways hard-coded into it. So for example, the PowerPoint template it's looking for has to be called template.pptx. And I haven't indicated any pathway, which means that it's going to look for it in the same folder as the Python script. The same goes for the data file here. It has to be called data.xlsx, and it needs to be sitting in the same folder as the Python script. You can modify these. You can change the name of the data or the file or the PowerPoint template. You can put it in a different pathway or different folder, but you have to remember that if you don't make those changes, this has to be done exactly this way or the script is not going to run. So now that I have all this here, I'm just going to run this script, and you can see that it ran it successfully, and it's created a new file here called output presentation. You can also see that's what I've told it to name it here. So let's go back to our folder, and there it is. There's our new presentation. That was created in like 3 seconds. And if I open this up, you can see that it has created 141 slides. Actually 140 because the title slide was already in there. But it's created one slide for every single variable in my data file. It has ported the question text into the main header here, and it is also applied the different chart types. You remember that column that said chart type? Some of them were pie charts, some of them were bar charts, some of them were horizontal bar charts or vertical bar charts. It's all been done. So that's pretty cool. We've done a pretty good job here. Created 140 slides in a few seconds and in this nice looking template. But when I look at this, the first thing I said to myself was maybe we can do a little bit better. So a couple of things that stood out to me here. One was, although I do have some variance in the chart types, this layout does get a little bit boring. So I want to create more layouts. So I'm going to create a second layout, and I'm going to ask ChatGPT to incorporate that layout. The second change is that I actually want to make some changes to the formatting. I don't like that it always shows the name here. I don't like the grid lines. I also wanted to add the data labels. So, and if I do this one chart by chart, it's going to still take hours. So I'm going to modify the code to introduce some new formatting rules that will get kind of baked into this process. The third thing I was thinking of when I was looking at this output was that I created this little text placeholder next to it, which is usually where you might write like kind of a highlight or an observation. And again, if you're going to go through 140 slides, that's going to take a while. So I asked myself, maybe I can get ChatGPT to automate writing the text summaries as well. So I'm going to go through all 3 of these steps here and see if I can address all 3 of these different requirements. So starting with the first one, what I did was I created a new template, which looks like this. All it does is instead of having the chart and text side by side, this one, the chart takes up the full width here and the text callout is just below it. And I created this one and I called it chart layout 2. And this is important because in my Excel file, I now need to associate certain variables with chart layout 2. And again, I was able to randomly assign this value. You could do it a different way. You could manually do it if you wanted to. But you can see if you scroll through here, some of these variables are chart layout 1, some are chart layout 2. Now you might wonder, okay, do I need to go through and find out the placeholder index again? Actually, no. The placeholder index will be exactly the same for this slide as it is for this one. You don't have to change that. It'll be the same. So as long as you're referencing the same placeholder, it'll be the same for both charts. The second thing is the chart formatting. So as I mentioned before, there's some chart formatting that I don't really like here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask it to remove the grid lines and the titles. I'm also actually going to ask it to remove the axes, but add the data labels. So I'm just going to write out all those instructions and give it to ChatGPT. The third thing though is a little bit harder. And that is that I want ChatGPT to write text summaries for each variable that's specific to that data point and that gets kind of ported into that text placeholder in each of the charts. Now, I went through a few versions of this prompt and I found that ChatGPT really struggled to do this. Sometimes it would give me more creative results, but it would just completely hallucinate the values, or it would show the right data, but it would just, the output would be super robotic and structured and just really not very nice. So what I found was that I had to give it very, very specific rules. So this was the prompt that I wrote that eventually kind of worked. I uploaded the data set, the raw data file, and I explained what the data is. And then I said, I would like you to write a short 1-sentence summary for each question. And I wanted to follow this exact format, the value followed by this text, followed by some information related to the response option, as well as the question text. So this at least makes it a little bit dynamic. What the output is going to look like is something like this, like 20% of respondents selected strongly agree when asked this question. And then I also mentioned when it comes to choosing which response option to put in, choose the one that was most selected. So it's going to highlight the one that was most often selected out of the 4 or 5 options in the scale. And then I asked it to give me a CSV file. This is going to get a little bit repetitive, but this was about as good as I could get it. So we're going to run this prompt. And you can see it gave me like a really quick response here, a CSV file. And then I was able to take the file it gave me and using a simple VLOOKUP, I was able to quickly drop it into each of these rows. And here's what the responses look like. So I've created a new column in the data file called text summary. And this is where it's got a single statistic that is going to be shown in the text placeholder for each slide. So this one, you can see it said 82% of respondents selected strongly agree when asked if they like listening to music, which is that point. This one is 58% of respondents selected moderately paced music when asked if they like slow or fast paced, and that maps to this one, and so on. And I'm sure if you spend a little bit more time with it, you might be able to get something a little bit more varied and creative. But in the time I had, this is about as good as I could get it. And again, this was a task that ChatGPT really, really struggled with. Now that I have my updated data file, now it supports different layouts. I have a new column that has text summaries, and I have a series of chart formatting rules. I'm going to go back to ChatGPT and ask it to update the script to accommodate these changes. And this was a follow-up prompt inside of the existing chat thread. And then I basically said, I have some new requests. First, I want to support a second layout. You'll find this under a new layout called chart layout 2. And I also mentioned that the index value is the same. It is 10. It's the same as the second one. I also mentioned that I have a number of chart formatting rules I want. So I said for bar charts, I want them to all be one color. If you saw in the previous template for the bar charts, each bar was a different color. It was really annoying. So I said, hey, let's make it one color and you can use this color. Here's the hex code. Then I also mentioned for bar charts, remove the axis, remove the chart title, and also add data labels and remove grid lines. And finally, I had the third point, which was that I've added a new column called text summary, and I want you to use this information and put it into the text placeholder. Now for this one, I needed to rerun that script that gets the placeholder index. So I'm not going to show you it again. You know how to do it. But what I did was I went back and reran that script, and I found that the text placeholder value or index value for that text summary next to the chart was actually placeholder 11. So now we have two placeholder index values that are important. 10, which is for the charts, and 11, which is for the text box that sits next to the chart or below it in my second layout. And ChatGPT was able to give me a revised script. So I'm going to drop all those files into a new folder. Again, the updated Python file, the updated PowerPoint template, and the updated data file. And we're going to go back to Visual Studio Code. We're going to go open folder. I've saved it under a folder called version 2. We're going to click V2, click open. And now we're just going to go to the Python file, generate charts v2, and I'm going to run this Python script. And there you go. You can see it's successfully created. Let's go see what it created. So there's the output file there. It's about just over a megabyte. And here it is. So again, 141 slides. And there is my text there. So it's ported in the text from my data file, which is kind of cool. You can see that it's also recognizing the different slide formats. This is chart layout 1 with the text added in. And this is chart layout 2. So this is the chart that goes across the full screen with the text below it. You can just see there's a little bit more variance in the layouts. So it's a little bit more interesting to look at. I'd probably go through another round here and make a few more changes. For some reason, it seems to be still adding the chart title to the pie chart, so we need to fix that. But overall, this is pretty cool. This is, again, 140 slides in a matter of seconds with formatted charts, a nice layout, and even some fairly basic text summaries. So this is looking pretty good. So as I mentioned, I've included all of the necessary files to basically run this tutorial in the description for this video. So you can download the Python scripts as well as the PowerPoint templates and the data files. Now, If you are going to make this work for you, you're probably going to have to make some changes. You might have to change the PowerPoint template, and you might also have to make some changes to the underlying code. But as you've seen with ChatGPT, it's actually really easy to do that. It gets a little bit easier if you're using GPT-4 in a paid plan because you can upload files and it can also give you downloadable files. But I'm pretty sure you can also do this on a freemium plan with OpenAI or another LLM like CodeLlama. Like I mentioned at the start of this video, you need to remember that giving great presentations is an art, and that art will take time sometimes. And you're not going to want to use this kind of automation for every slide deck that you ever create. You need to use this wisely, and really only when the occasion arises where you have to create essentially what is a data dump, which is just a lot of repetitive slides with charts. And when those situations arise, I hope that this automation saves you tons of time so you can spend more time doing things that really matter, like data analysis. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I would appreciate if you can like the video and subscribe to my channel. And I also teach some courses on Udemy. There are links to those in the description as well. So if you want to learn about market research or marketing analytics, definitely go and check out my courses. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.